So I've been playing Haunting Ground. You know, every once in a while, something happens that you just feel kind of proud of. Something that maybe, just maybe, you kind of rub into people's faces. Well, something like that happened to me quite recently. Thing is, I picked up a sealed, unopened copy of Haunting Ground for only $10. This game is rare and pretty expensive, and I bought it from a store that didn't know shit about it. Now, Europe is a pretty scary place. I can know because I live there. I mean, there's like Austrian people, and Alps, and Ubisoft, and also castles. And our heroine Fiona just so happens to wake up in one of these castles. And all she remembers is that she was in a car accident and that she was somehow brought here by some dude. That dude being Ricardo. Ricardo kidnapped her because Fiona is the carrier of Azoth. Which basically means that they want her to get preggers with some kind of demon spawn, and that leads to all kinds of implications and suggestive themes. Or, well, it seems like the game may have tried to be subtle about its themes, but it isn't really, as the castle you're in is only a few steps away from being called Casa del Rape or something like that. I mean, right from the get-go, Fiona gets handed the skimpiest of clothing possible while getting oogled on by some perv behind a painting. Pretty much every camera angle is as voyeuristic as it could possibly get without having to resort to snail tactics. The game has jiggle physics that would make even Team Ninja jealous, and the whole preggers thing opens up a whole new world of fetishistic fanboy possibilities alongside all of the kinky shit that's already in there. From mannequins to sex dungeons to simply big stonking tits, this game has it all. And it's almost like Capcom actually kinda thought about things thematically so they could get away with things other games can't. Well, depending on who you ask, I guess, but it works in the game's favor as far as the theme goes, so I'm totally cool with it. Now, you might think to yourself, a Japanese game with rapey vibes? Nothing new there, mate. Yeah, you'd certainly make a good point, but the implied and suggested in this game aren't like fanservice-y or anything. Though I don't think they didn't mind the possibility either. But it basically uses the feeling of being perved upon or even potentially raped as a way to create horror, which, you know, probably rustled some fairly easily rustled jimmies, but I still think it's pretty interesting. I mean, it's definitely a subject that you would want to handle with a certain type of care, and I'm not sure the game necessarily always does that. But it does work from a psychological standpoint. Like, something about this huge, hulking, mentally disabled dude throwing away his little doll in favor of Fiona definitely triggered an instinct within me screaming, "Run away! Run away! Run away!" And that's why I think that it's an interesting theme to tackle within a horror game. It's like a different kind of fear than escaping from death or just running away from some generic boogeyman. There's a certain type of sickness to it that not only creates a pretty good motivation to keep running, but also just makes you feel kinda uneasy. And uneasy and horror go hand in hand. Also, the fact that this is one of the few, if not the only, Capcom game where the story isn't brain that stupid and the voice acting and writing aren't done by monkeys, meant that I could actually take the story seriously, and considering the themes that it utilizes, I'd say that that's a very good fucking thing. Anyway, Haunting Ground began its development as a Clock Tower spin-off. So it plays like a Clock Tower game minus the point-and-click interface. So unlike Resident Evil or Silent Hill, there's no combat at all. Instead, there is a single enemy running around the castle, going about their own business, and they will chase you once they find you. And you run around the same castle going about your own business, which is solving puzzles and exploring. Once an enemy will start chasing you though, the objective is to lose them by either running your ass off or hiding, as Fiona is completely defenseless. Eventually, they'll give up and go their merry way, and you can continue to do so as well until you happen to encounter them again. Now, because Fiona doesn't really stand a chance against these assholes, Yui will be there to save the day. Yui is a dog person, whom you can give commands with the right analog stick. Depending on whether or not you're being chased, you can have him attack enemies or search for items. And you also have the ability to scold him or praise him based on his actions. The interesting thing about this is that doing it when appropriate will actually affect his AI. So, when he finds something, you can praise him and he'll be more prone to find shit later on. But if he's running off constantly or his AI is bugging out, scolding him will teach him not to do so. Now, I don't know if that actually means that laying down some extreme scoldage will eventually turn him into an asshole just like a real dog, as I couldn't bring myself to try. But playing the game normally, I didn't really notice the effect of this all that much other than him teleporting whenever he got stuck somewhere. Which is certainly a useful feature, but not necessarily the most elegant solution to sometimes sketchy AI. All that said though, Yui's behavior is pretty damn realistic, and while I'm not much of a dog person, it was still kinda cool to see, and I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't attached to him either. I mean, you do kinda need him, as Fiona isn't incredibly competent, so whether it's as a functional tool or as an actual dog, you'll likely get attached to him either way. Anyway, the game is split up into chapters, each with their own main enemy. At the end of each chapter, you'll have to do a boss fight thing, killing off said enemy and moving on to the next. The enemies in question range from this special fellow simply wanting a new dog to play with, to the owner of this castle wanting to impregnate you because reasons. And as I already said, these will chase you around the castle. Now, the chasing itself, while very cool on paper, and it's not like it never is either, does get really fucking annoying at times. Like, imagine you're just on the verge of solving a puzzle and you know exactly where you need to go. But then, all of a sudden, some asshole shows up and just decides to ruin the mood. And these chases can take up minutes depending on how quickly you can find a bed or a closet to hide in. So they can be pretty disruptive, especially when you take into consideration that they stop being scary rather quickly once you know what the deal is. God damn it, doorbell! And again, I do like the idea, and I could definitely see it work for a short 2D adventure game like the original Clock Tower. But in a full-on 6 to 7 hour long adventure, it can be a bit grating as the game relies almost 100% on the AI, so they can pop up at even the most inappropriate of moments, like literally right after you lost them, for instance. I honestly kind of feel that the game would have been better off if its enemies were just a little bit more reserved. I mean, the atmosphere in this is pretty fucking great. The music is excellent, and they make great use of ambient sounds throughout the entire game. Really, with the atmosphere this good, and with the constant uneasiness of the cutscenes and dialogue, this is probably the most horror a Capcom survival horror game has been outside of Remake. And that's really fucking cool. Sure, walking around can be a bit awkward as the camera is very eager to move, and while it looks cool, the game doesn't have tank controls. So if you saw me bumping into things or spazzing out throughout this review, then that's why. But walking around the castle never felt boring just because of how oppressive the atmosphere is. I mean, imagine walking around and finding this guy without any explanation or reason. If he doesn't really do anything, he just kinda hangs around, naked. And it would have been amazing if every once in a while someone would just pop out of nowhere, breaking through the windows or busting down a door, leaving you to do nothing but shitting your pants and running away. But they don't really do that. Either they're just hanging around doing fuck all, or they just happen to walk through a door at random, just bumping into you, being just as surprised as you are. The only time where they kinda experiment with this is with the maid character, who wants Fiona's lady parts because she lacks them. Thing is that the maid still has her job to do, so sometimes you'll bump into her and she'll just be cleaning the room, ignoring you. That shit's pretty fucking tense. But other than that, they'll usually just aimlessly run around the castle. It kinda takes the tension away as it doesn't really feel like they're actually chasing you. And that's quite poopy in my opinion. Apart from being chased around though, the gameplay mostly revolves around solving puzzles. The puzzles in question are kinda all over the place in terms of difficulty, as they usually just revolve around cryptic riddles instead of finding keys and shit. So it just kinda depends on whether or not the meaning behind it clicks with you. Sometimes I instantly got what it was referring to, and other times I could only exclamate a "You what, mate?" only to walk around aimlessly for a couple of minutes. It's definitely something different though, and there are usually multiple puzzles going on at the same time as well, so it's not like getting stuck will leave you with absolutely nothing to do either. Overall though, the game is pretty alright. It's certainly not the best thing Capcom has ever done, but much like RE4, this game is kind of experimental, and experiments can always go either way. Although, it is pretty cool to finally see a game cater towards my kicking tiny naked dudes fetish.